𝗟𝗶𝘃𝗀𝗃𝗃, good evening and a very warm welcome to all of you in our TaxGPT session today. As summers have started setting in, we thought it would be good to cool everyone down by answering as many heated corporate tax questions as we can. In the next 1 hour, we will try to answer all the questions which we've received over email on the registration links. And subsequently, we would also take up any questions from the audience present here. Of course, you all can type your questions in the Q&A chat box and our team would answer them on a real-time basis. To start the show, we have received a lot of questions with respect to corporate tax registrations, deductions which can be claimed while calculating the taxable income, what happens to the remuneration which is paid to the shareholders. We've also received few questions on the timelines for opting certain reliefs which are provided by the corporate tax law. The forming of tax groups is another subject of interest for many companies. We will be addressing certain questions on that as well. Now, for non-resident entities who have presence in UAE or vice versa, we will also take some questions addressing few pertinent issues with respect to registrations as well as taxability. With this, I would like to tell you all that I have my entire team present here to answer your questions. And I'll open the stage for my colleague Karishma as a moderator and Kushal, Ashish and Saurabh as panelists. Over to you, Karishma.
Thank you so much, Kinjal, and a very good evening to everyone. So without wasting further time, I think let's dive into the questions because we have received plenty questions and we want to make an optimum utilization of this 1 hour that we have with us. So let me start with very burning questions that everyone right now is having in their mind, that is with respect to the registrations. There are many people and many questions that we have received. When do we register? Do I need to register even if I'm conducting a business or not? Even if I have not cancelled my license, do I need to register? There are many questions that people have asked. And I would like to just take a few hot questions, which are important questions which we felt, because irrespective of it, anyone has to register for the corporate tax. Most of the dust with respect to corporate tax is now clear. There were many clarifications and many other guides which were issued by the authorities, clarifying so many things and clearing all the doubts which people had. Still, there is some ambiguity. There are some conditions and there are some instances where we need more clarity and more understanding from the authorities. We await, but more or less now the corporate tax law is very clear and most of the understanding is clear. Still, there are some questions that people have and we are here to answer those questions and clarify all the doubts you may have. So I would start with a very basic question that we have received, that is with respect to an offshore entity. So people have a question that if I'm having an offshore entity, do I need to register for the corporate tax purpose? So Saurabh, if you would like to answer this question, does an offshore entity require to register for the corporate tax?
Yes, so for like every entity, the corporate tax will be applicable and need to register, including offshore entities also. So like in the only Amara tax portal, there is no specific option to select the offshore entities. We need to register by selecting the legal person and other type in the in the structure, and then we need to register for offshore entities.
Understood. Just to elaborate on this question, Saurabh, can you also tell what will be considered for offshore entities? Like the offshore entities does not have a trade license. So on what basis they will register their companies?
So for in the offshore entities, we don't need like trade license. There is an option to select like without trade license, need to register. We have UAE without a trade license. So we can register including that, and that in the next step, we don't need to upload trade license or like enter all the details of trade license.
Understood. Thank you so much for answering that question, Saurabh. Just to elaborate on that, I want to highlight one more point, that for the offshore entities, they do not have a trade license, but yes, they do have a certificate of incorporation. So for all the offshore entities, the trigger where you have to register your companies for the corporate tax would be the issuance date of your certificate of incorporation. So supposingly if you have a certificate of incorporation which is issued, suppose in the month of June 2023, so you'll have to consider your certificate of incorporation of 23, and based on that you need to register your company. So I hope whosoever has asked that question with respect to offshore entities, it clarifies your answer. Coming to the second question, that is with respect to a natural person. Of course, there are many individuals who have been conducting their business activities in the UAE, and they have this question that what do I do? Even if I'm a freelancer, even if I'm doing a normal business, even if I'm just earning a salary income, do I need to register? What if I have a multiple businesses? So next question is with respect to multiple businesses. Someone has asked that if I'm a natural person and I'm conducting multiple businesses that are, and I'm operating through a different business activities and different trade licenses. So do I need to register my each business separately and file a separate corporate tax return for this? So Kushal, if you can answer this question, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Karishma, and good evening, everyone. So for corporate tax, in Corporate Tax Act, the taxable persons are divided into basically into two parts. One are natural persons and other are judicial persons. So natural person includes individuals like us who are doing business from their own or by through freelancing or having salary income and other. And judicial person includes companies, partnership firms, and etc. So elaborating for natural persons includes freelancers, sole establishment entities having unlimited liability. Sole establishment entities having unlimited liability will be considered as natural persons. And for natural persons, taxability will only arise when they are doing business. And the annual revenue during the Gregorian calendar year exceeds 1 million dirhams. So if a natural person is having business and the revenue exceeds 1 million dirhams during a year, then they are only taxable. And what includes in natural person? Natural person includes sole establishment entities also. Like if I am a natural person, I am doing business through 3 or 4 sole establishment entities, and each one is earning revenue of 5 million dirhams and to aggregate revenues 2 million dirhams. Then the 1 million limit will be calculated for all of my entities. So, and while doing registration, all 4 entities will be registered on my name, on the owner's name, and only one return will be filed. And the basic exemption limit of 375,000 dirhams will be allowed once for all entities only.
Thank you, Kushal. Thank you so much. So I hope this answers the question that a natural person, just to simplify, a natural person has to register. Being operating as a sole proprietorship or a sole owner will be considered as only one person, and all the entities he is operating need to register combined. The moment you make a sole proprietorship LLC, you go into LLC, you lose this benefit, and all the LLC company needs to register separately, and then you'll get that benefit. Coming to another question, that is with respect to registration, someone has asked, I'm having a service agency. So will it be considered as a natural person or a juridical person? So over to you, 𝗬𝗏. Can you please elaborate on this point?
So service agency can be classified as either, depending on its legal structure. So if the agency has like unlimited liability, then it will be considered as sole establishment and it will be treated as natural person. But if the liability is limited, then it will be considered as LLC and treated as juridical person. So it will depend on its legal structure, whether what it is classified as a like sole establishment or it will be classified as a LLC.
Okay, understood. Thank you so much, 𝗬𝗏. So for service industry, you need to specify, you need to check, are you a legal person? The moment you are LLC, same as elaborated by Kushal as well, the moment you go into LLC, you lose the benefit of being a natural person, and you need to register and comply with the regulations of a juridical person. Coming to another question that is coming with respect to a non-resident person. So there's an entity, someone has incorporated an entity into BVI, but the directors, however, are sitting into the UAE. Does this company, which is registered outside the UAE, that is into BVI, need to comply with UAE regulations? Ashish would like to know your thoughts on this question.
Yeah, thanks Karishma for the question, and thanks Kinjal for such a warm welcome. Now, to answer the question, for entities that are incorporated outside the UAE and the directors sitting in the UAE, all these entities need to ask one basic question to themselves. Are they effectively managed and controlled from the UAE? If the answer to this question is yes, then yeah, city law will be applicable to you. And if the answer to this question is no, then it does not necessarily mean that you're outside the purview of UAE city law. Then you need to determine whether you have a PE into the UAE, or are you deriving any state source income, or do you have any nexus into the UAE. So Now, the question of effectively managed and controlled from the UA is very subjective. One needs to determine that from case to case basis. However, the basic points that one should consider while determining this are where the board meetings are held, where the minutes of the meetings are kept, where the key decision makers are residing, because it is not necessary that the directors are the ones that are taking the key decisions to run the business. So when you do this exercise, you will be able to determine whether you're effectively managed and controlled from the UAE or not. And accordingly, you can decide whether UAE city law would be applicable on you or not. I hope this answers the question. Thanks.
Yes, definitely, definitely, Ashish. Thank you so much. Moving on to the next question, which is with respect to a realization principle. So someone has asked that what exactly is this realization principle, and when do I need to realize the income whenever if I'm earning based on this realization principle? So Kushal, can you please elaborate your thoughts on this?
Yeah, sure, Karishma. Realization principle, just before understanding the realization principle, generally entities prepare their financials according to IFRS, and IFRS states that you should prepare your financials on accrual basis. And there are certain assets which are fair valued and at the end of financial year. And if such assets are fair valued, there may be a fair value gain, fair value loss. The Corporate Tax Act says that you have an option that you should realize this fair value gain or loss only on actual sale or actual transfer of the assets or liabilities. Generally, if you are having fair value gain at the end of year, and you are opting to realize such gains on actual realization, then the fair value gain for particular year will be excluded from your taxable income when you are calculating taxable incomes. So, and the another question was that when the income is realized on for UAE corporate tax purpose, and the answer for is that if you have choose the option to realize such gains at actual realization, so then income will be taxable when there is actual transfer or actual sale of asset. I think that suffices the answer, and if anything wants to add something, they can add.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kushal. Just one point to be added on this point, that this realization principle, you have two options. Either you select for all the assets and liabilities that you have in your books of accounts, or you only go for this avail only with respect to the capital assets. So it's in your hand. The company need to elaborate what all items do they have in their books, in their financial statements, and accordingly you can opt for this principle. And at the time of filing your first corporate tax return, you can avail and make an application and avail for this realization principle. Coming to the next question, which is with respect to reliefs, there are many companies or many businesses which are operating, which have just started up their business or are just in the motion of getting their business started up, and which are very small business and they do not have that much of business coming up. So Kinjal would like to know your thoughts. If say suppose someone has asked that I'm a very small business which has just started up and my turnover has not exceeded 83 million yet. So when do I need to apply for the small business relief? And even if I'm not exceeding 3 million dirhams, do I still need to register or comply with the corporate tax law?
Thanks, Karishma, for this question. So for your first bit to answer, there are several reliefs which UAE corporate tax law offers. Apart from small business relief, there are also reliefs which are with respect to transitional provisions, which grandfathers the capital gains which you have earned in your pre-tax period. Then there are a lot of provisions. There's a provision of qualifying tax group where you transfer the assets between the group. It allows you that if you are a qualifying tax group, you comply with certain conditions, then you don't need to pay taxes on it. So all these reliefs which are to be elected, that they have to be elected at the time of filing of return of income. So ideally, if you are falling between a period of Jan to December, then your first corporate tax return will be due on 30th September. And that is the time where you will be electing that, okay, these all are the reliefs which I want to offer.
Understood. Thank you so much, Kinjal. So I hope whosoever has asked this question, this clarifies that even if you're a small business, you need to register and you need to comply with laws and regulations. However, yes, you get this benefit, you can opt for it and may not be eligible to pay any taxes.
So we have to, just to add here, as we have to elect this in the return filing, you can file your return only if you register. So yes, by that logic, registration is mandatory. The law does not exempt you from registration, but it does exempt you from paying of tax.
True. Thank you so much, Kinjal. Coming to another hot topic, registration, coming back to the question of registration. Saurabh would like to know, someone has asked that I'm having a dual license, and what basis do I consider when I'm doing my registration, and also what would be my deadline for the registration, for the corporate tax registration?
Yeah. So for like dual licensing, the deadline for CT registration is determined by on the earlier issuance date of either license. For example, if one license was issued on like July 10, 2022, and the other on April 10, 2023, the due date for registration would be calculated on the first issuance date. In this case, considering the first issuance date, the July 10, 22 will be considered. And according to that, the deadline would be September 30th, 2024. Like many thought like we would be taking the month, but in this case, we will not taking the month, we'll also consider the year, as July 10, 2022 is the previous year according to like 10th April 23. So we'll take this date.
Understood. Okay, thank you so much, Saurabh. So I hope this also clarifies that if you're having a dual license, you consider the earliest date that you have to earlier month as well as the year, and then based on that you need to register. So if someone has missed it, please check your dual licenses, and we don't want anyone to be paying any kind of penalties for the late registration. Coming to another important question, that is with respect to PE, someone has asked that when will I trigger a PE in the UAE, and how do I discharge tax into the UAE with respect to my PE? Ashish, would you like to elaborate your thoughts on this?
Yes, sure. That's an interesting question. Thanks, Karishma. So basically, if we look at global standards, most countries recognize PEs into three different types. One is fixed place PE, another is service PE, and the third one is agency PE. While surprisingly, in UAE city law, there are only two kinds of PE, fixed place PE and agency PE. This creates an interesting situation where, there are several DTAAs which are concluded by UAE, which mentions service PEs. However, in UAE city, there are only two PEs. So if one has to avail a treaty benefit, then surprisingly, the domestic law would become more beneficial to them than the tax treaty itself in case of service PEs. And to explain the taxability, I'll just give an example to understand it better. Let's say a company incorporated in US is into the real estate business, has engaged some agents here to who can habitually exercise contracts on their behalf or conclude contracts, negotiate contracts on their behalf, which are then finally signed by the US entity without any material changes into them. Then this would establish an agency PE for that US entity into the UAE, making them liable to corporate taxes, and they will be required to register as well as comply with all UAE city laws that are applicable to any entity. Thanks.
Understood. Thank you so much, Ashish. So coming to another question, I don't know whosoever has asked this question still feels, or maybe they think that their personal expenses, if they are incurring, they would be taking into their books of accounts and claim a deduction for it. But still, I would like to know, Kushal, your thoughts. Can a person or can any company claim any personal expenses they are incurring into the books of accounts with respect to corporate tax? Also, someone has asked a related question to it, that can we use personal accounts for making any company payments while into my books of accounts or by preparing the financial statements?
So regarding the deductibility of personal expenses, corporate tax says that any expenses which is in personal nature, like that expense is used to personal benefit of owners, to managers, or any relatively the persons who can manage the entity, who can control the entity, then those expenses will be treated as personal expenses and will be 100% disallowed. There will be no deduction for such expenses. So if you are having expenses which are not for the benefit of the company, which are not for the company, but to the benefit of the owners and the managers, then those particular expenses will be disallowed while calculating the taxable income. And the another question is that can we use personal accounts to make payments on behalf of company? Yes, you can use the personal accounts of owners, but for that you must have the proper documentation, like the expenses which you are paying, you should have proper bill, proper invoice for such expense that you are paying, the owner is paying on behalf of company, and there should be a proper reimbursement entry to the owner. So that there should be a proper bifurcation that this expenses is for the company and this expenses for the personal nature. Because certain times expenses paid by owners and then claiming back from entity will give a rise to authorities that it may be a expense which is a personal in nature. You should properly document such expenses, and you should not book the personal nature of expenses to accounts of the company.
Understood. Thank you so much, Kushal. So before going further, I would just want to have some thoughts of Kinjal with respect to deductions. Kinjal, can you please give a brief overview about, as compared to what Kushal has explained, he has already explained what will be considered as personal expenditure or what expenses can a company claim, but a brief overview from your end, like what all expenses can a company claim now that this corporate tax period has started? What is all things that they need to be mindful of while preparing their financial statements?
Sure, Karishma. So I think this question would impact the audience at large, since everyone would require to prepare their tax computation for filing their return of income. And so one thing is very clear: the starting point of your tax computation is your accounting profit. Now, there are certain, which would be as per your financial statements. Now, there are certain adjustments which are made to your accounting profit to arrive at your taxable profit, on which the 9% liability will trigger. Now, talking about those adjustments which are to be specifically made, those will be the expenses, your expense part of your profit and loss account. One thing is very clear: all the revenue expenditure, except which are specifically for which specifically rules are being made, and I would discuss those as well, are allowed if they pertain to your business. Those expenses would be allowed for claiming the deduction. There are certain choices you can make, as we discussed earlier also, for certain income to be grandfathered, or for opting realization or gains on realization basis, unrealization basis. So all that aspects also you would need to consider. Now, there are two specific deductions which are clarified in the CT law, and which we would specifically figure it out in the computation. One is the entertainment expenditure, and another one is the interest expenditure. So there are limits to which these expenditures would be allowed while calculating your taxable income. Now, if we talk about entertainment expenditure at large, these are the expenditure which you incur for your shareholders, directors, your clients, your stakeholders. All these expenses would be limited to 50%. So now it becomes important while preparing your financial statements to see which expenditure actually falls under the limb of entertainment expenditure. And if you could segregate the other expenditure which are incurred wholly for the purpose of the business. Just to give you an example, if my director is traveling overseas for a meeting, the travel expenditure is absolutely a business expenditure. So just because it is travel of a director, it would not fall under entertainment expenditure. Another exemption in entertainment expenditure is entertainment expenditure which is incurred for employees. That is again 100% allowed. So only specific entertainment expenditure which are for a purpose would be restricted to 50%, and rest everything would be allowed. Now, coming to interest expenditure, there is a specific limit which is there, that 30% of your earnings before interest or tax. Here, they are not referring to net profit. Here, what they're referring to is EBITDA, which is your earnings before interest, depreciation, and taxation. Either 30% of that or AED 12 bill, whichever is higher, would be allowed to be claimed as a deduction. So these two specific deductions would impact most of our audience and are relevant for them to note. Of course, it goes without saying that all your transactions should be at arm's length price for them to be allowed as a deduction. Yeah, so that is an overview, and we can take any specific questions if we come across.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kinjal. So I think this gives a brief overview about understanding all the deductions and all the applications that people need to make. Coming to another important question with respect to registration, Saurav would like to know. I think Saurav has done so many registrations now that he is quite aware about every kind of transactions or every kind of complexities that we have arrived. So I would like to know, Saurav, someone has asked that I'm having a UAE branch, but it is with respect to my Singapore entity. Do I still need to register for the corporate tax?
Yes, like as mentioned earlier, corporate tax applies to every entity, including branches of a foreign entity. Therefore, CT registration is required in this case, as the branch will be considered permanent establishment in the UAE for a foreign entity. So foreign entity with either POEM, place of effective management, PE, or nexus in UAE needs to comply with UAE corporate tax.
Understood. Thank you so much, Saurabh. So just to elaborate on this point and give more idea about with respect to the registration, as that's the only part of the law where everyone is right now engaged, as everyone wants to get registered, and no one would definitely want to have this penalty of 10,000 dirhams for just missing even a day for your CT registration. So every company who is registered into the UAE, they definitely have to register for corporate tax. Apart from that, every non-resident person who is either having a permanent establishment or having the POEM or having any kind of nexus or having any kind of state sourced income need to register for the UAE city. Other than that, any exempt person, as you know that some of the criterias of the business have been kept exempt, even they have to register. Apart from that, any investment fund or any foundation which have been given special relief, that you are required for the corporate tax to be registered, and you are required to file any taxes if applicable, but you may not be required to pay any taxes and you can apply for exemption. So even these kind of companies or these kind of structures need to register first and then apply for any kind of qualification or reliefs that you want. So every company, whosoever it is, unless and until you're not planning to liquidate your company and you have your deadline approaching, you need to register your company for the corporate tax. Coming to another question, similarly as with respect to the Singapore entity, someone has asked that a company is located in the Singapore, but it's earning a rental income out of the property which is located into the UAE. Do my company come into the purview of corporate tax? So Ashish would like to know your thoughts on this question.
Yes, sure. So this is a very straightforward provision in UAE city law. It says that any non-resident juridical person would be considered to have nexus in the UAE if they derive any kind of income from any immovable property located in the UAE. So you don't have to scratch your head around whether it's a commercial property or is it a residential property, whether the property is located in the mainland or is it located in the free zone. You don't have to think any of that. If you are deriving income from immovable property, being a non-resident juridical person, you are liable to pay corporate taxes in UAE and liable to be registered for that. Interestingly, if a natural person derives similar kind of income, then it would be a very different case because that would be considered as a personal investment income and it is outside the purview of UAE corporate taxes. So yeah, that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Ashish. So I hope it gives a bit idea and a very clearer idea that juridical person, by so far whatever your status is, you need to register. The moment you are earning income as a natural person, you do not need to register for the corporate tax, neither pay any taxes on for the city. Coming to another question, someone has asked that, can I draw a remuneration from my company, or if I can draw, whether I can draw being if I'm a sole proprietor or if my company's, if it's not a sole proprietorship but an LLC company, can I draw my salaries under both the circumstances? So Kushal, would you like to answer this question? You're on mute, Kushal.
So as earlier explained by me, individual can own a company by two ways. One is sole establishment, which have unlimited liability and which don't have any separate legal entity from its owner. And another entity is sole proprietorships LLC, which have limited liability and have a separate legal entity from its owners. So if you are having salary income from your sole establishment entity, which is treated as natural person, then you can have as much salary as you want, but that will not be allowed as deduction from corporate taxes. You can withdraw salaries, but while calculating taxable incomes from your book profits, this particular salary will be added back to your income. And when you are withdrawing salary from your limited liability company, which is a separate legal entity, then you can withdraw salary. But you should take care of benchmarking or arm's length price for such salary. You can't withdraw more than the market allows. Like your salary should be as per market standard, as per benchmark. If and the salary which is more than your benchmark or market standard will be disallowed from which will be disallowed as expenses from corporate taxes.
Understood. Thank you so much, Kushal. So one more question which comes now with respect to registration. This is the last question that we have for registration. Someone is saying that I missed to register my company before the deadline, which was 31st of May 2024, and I although applied for registration on 5th June. However, I still haven't received my corporate tax registration certificate. And have you seen any penalties being levied for missing the deadline for the CT registration? So Saurabh, would like to know your thoughts with respect to this. Have you faced any kind of similar situation where we have missed the deadline and there was a penalty for late registration?
Yeah, like so I have submitted several registration after May 31st for few of our clients who missed their deadline, but none of has yet been approved. All are currently under review process. So I haven't seen any penalties yet, but I am certain that they will be light on the entities that miss their deadlines.
True.
And
So
one
please.
more thing I want to add, like just an additional view for registration from my end, that the due date for CT registration are determined based on the month of issuance, except for companies incorporated after March 1st, 2024. Like for these companies, the due date will be 3 months from the license issuance date. As for companies already registered, there are guide and like their due dates are already predefined. But for the companies which are incorporated after 1st March 2024, their due date will be 3 months. And the ones which are incorporated after 1st March 24 need to focus more and need to be attentive, because like for them, the date is not fixed. So for example, like I want to add one example, if the issuance date is March 28, 2024, the due date will be June 28, like tomorrow is the due date, because 3 months will be June 28, 2024. However, if the same date will consider, but if we change the year, like March 28, 2023, then the due date will be 30th June 2024.
Correct. Thank you. Thank you so much, Saurabh. I think this explains and clarifies the doubts whatever people had with respect to the registration. So be mindful of when your companies register, what is the issuance date. Is it registered before 1st March or is it registered after 1st March? Accordingly, you need to determine your registration deadline and need to submit an application within time. Another question which has come with respect to TP documentation. So someone has asked that I am a free zone entity. Do I need to comply with the TP documentation? And if so, then what are all the things that I need to be mindful of? So Ashish, can you please elaborate on this, your thoughts on this question?
Yes. So that's an interesting question again. Free zone entity has nothing to do with the classifier. So I will classify the TP documentation requirements into two parts. And one, entities who are required to maintain master file and local file, and entities who are not required to maintain master file and local file. Now, master file and local file is required if you exceed a revenue threshold of AED 200 million dirhams, and other, or else if you are part of a business MNC which whose revenue exceeds 3.15 billion dirhams consolidated revenue. So these entities need to maintain a master file, local file, submit a CBC report in their parent jurisdiction, and do all these requirements. But entities who are not required to do this, whose revenue is less than the mentioned threshold, even they are required to maintain at least the minimum information relating to their arm's length price, which is determined, the benchmarking study they have conducted, because FTA can anytime ask for the information to see if the arm's length price that is derived is as per the UAE city law and complies with all the requirements. So it is advisable to maintain the minutes of meetings where the decisions are taken, to maintain the preserve the invoices that are issued to related parties, or benchmarking study reports you have conducted, any functional analysis you have done, and all these documents, so that if in case in future if FT asks for the justification of the arm's length price, you have documents to prove that. Thanks.
True. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashish. So I hope
Just to
this
add,
clarifies.
to what Ashish is saying. So all the companies now are, receiving a lot of traction on the TP documentation maintaining requirements, because when you are conducting transactions with your related parties, it is of utmost important that they are at arm's length. That is the first step. The second is that it is also utmost important that you maintain the we don't have to submit immediately anything to the FTA, the Federal Tax Authority. You just have to maintain these documents to make sure that the ALP which is computed is backed up by the sufficient documentation. Intercompany agreements would play a major role in this, and the company should revisit their intercompany agreements and make sure that all the relevant terms and conditions which are required are incorporated in that, as well as based on the benchmarking analysis or the group transfer pricing policy of the company, the intercompany agreements are amended so that if in any case in future the ALP is questioned, the company is able to substantiate the same.
True. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kinjal. So I think someone had asked the similar kind of question in the Q&A session as well. So I hope that is also being answered. Coming to the last question that we have at our end is with respect to how and when can we create a tax group? So Kushal, I would like to know your thoughts with respect to this question.
So before answering when and how, I just want to throw a light on who can form a tax group. So there are certain conditions to form a tax group, and major conditions from them are the holding company, or there must be a common holding of 95% or more between the entities who wants to form a tax group. No entity should be a qualifying free zone person. No entity should be exempt person, and all entities should prepare financials on same financial basis. These are just major conditions that you should follow. So before answering how we can form a tax group, first of all, you need to register individually every entity who wants to be member of that tax group. You want to register every entity, and then after that, before ending your financial year, you have to apply to the FTA that we want to form a tax group between these between these entities, and then you can after approval of that application to form a tax group, you can form a tax group. And just want to add some more points for that. There are some clients or there are some entities who just change their ownership structure between this in between the first corporate tax year. Then you can't form tax group for the first corporate tax year, as the conditions to form a tax group should be complied for the whole tax period. If you are satisfying any condition in between the tax year, then that will not satisfy the condition to form a tax group. So you must the decision to form a tax group or not will also depend on certain limitations, certain benefits, because there are a lot of benefits to form a tax group. For some entities, there are certain limitations to form a tax group. So you should do pros and cons of forming a tax group or not before forming a tax group.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kushal. So I hope this answers whoever has asked with respect to tax group. And just to elaborate further on this point, not only with respect to tax group, but with other reliefs, as also mentioned by Kinjal earlier, that there are many reliefs that are being offered. That is with respect to your tax group, with respect to your qualifying group, with respect to the small business relief, also with respect to the transitional provisions. Then if you want to opt for the realized gains or unrealized gains. So all these questions also, if you're an exempt person, if you have any kind of exempt income, all these things, wherever there is an option that you can opt or you need to opt and then submit to the authorities, all these needs to be undertaken and submitted while filing your first corporate tax return. So whenever you are liable to file your first corporate tax return, most probably as Jan to December is your financial year, you have 9 months, that is till 30th September 2025. Before that, whenever you are filing your first corporate tax return, at that time, you need to notify to the authorities if you are availing and if you want to avail any of the benefits that are being given to you. And during that time, once you elect an option or once you opt for it, it is irrevocable in many of the cases until and unless you have very proper justification to show to the authorities that you do not more want to continue with respect to the reliefs or whatever option that you have opted for. So I hope this clarifies. With this, these were all the questions that we have received with respect to for all the applications that we have sent for the registration. We would now like to have some questions that we have in the Q&A session so that it answers all the questions that we have, and post that if you still have any questions, you can type us and then we'll try to answer those questions. So Kinjal, would you like to take the questions that we have in the Q&A session?
I think yes, we can take few, although we've answered most of them.
We have answered, yeah, few of them has already been answered, but the rest, if we can.
Yeah. So I'll take a question from 𝗟𝗶𝘃𝗃𝗃. MNC has a branch in free zone. Company has TP at a global level, but not local level. Is it required to maintain local TP policy, or a group level one is acceptable? In this case, Ramesh, although the group level policy, you can take guidance from the group level policy, but it would be recommended that you maintain something at a local level to demonstrate what transaction your branch has with the head office in USA. And that could be maintained in your file so that in future you can, if there is any questions on the transactions, you can justify them. So you can take the guidance from, of course, the policy which is available at the global level. I have one more question, Karishma.
Sure.
If you could answer the same.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
This is about third port shipment. Third port shipment like supplier in India. So the buyer is in USA and the payment will be done to the supplier from UAE and will receive our payment from USA. So this income will be liable for tax. I think this is a little confusing.
It's a very vague question in itself.
Yeah. So, Mr. V. Kumar, it would be great if you could email us the full query with the facts, and we would happy to answer the same.
But just to throw a light on this question in just one line, I would not elaborate much. If your company is registered in a designated free zone, and if you're opting for this third port shipment via a designated free zone entity, supposingly say 𝗂𝗧 or safe zone or any other designated free zone, then whatever income you're deriving, it will be treated as your qualifying income and subject to 0% tax. But the moment this third port shipment is being undertaken from a free zone which is not a designated free zone, that is other than that, then you would not get this benefit of qualifying income, and all your income that you're deriving from this would be treated as your taxable income. But still, it would be helpful for us if you can elaborate more, and you can mail us with a detailed question, and would be happy to answer in detail.
So Karishma, just for the interest of audience, there's one more question again asking if the offshore entity is required to register. So offshore entity are required to register for corporate tax, and the 1 month deadline of 31st May is already gone. For the next deadline of 30th June, we are just 2 days away from it. So any offshore entities, any audience has an offshore entity, it is mandatory for an offshore entity to register, and you should initiate the registration process immediately. Any other questions you want to take?
I think there's one with respect to a natural person. Some anonymous person has asked that a natural person whose turnover more than 1 million during 2024 changed to LLC during July 1, 2024. Should the natural person register and file return from Jan to June 2024, or should the LLC register and file return for the entire period? So I think this is a very practical scenario that someone is operating under, that they already have a sole proprietorship and then shifted to LLC. So in my opinion, looking at the scenario currently, for natural person, the deadline is very clear. They have said that for natural person, you have to determine if your income during the Gregorian calendar period, that is from Jan to December 2024, if it is exceeding 1 million, only then you are liable to register, and that too by 31st March 2025, you register and file your return if it is exceeding 1 billion. If that is not the case, then you do not need to register, and neither you need to file any corporate tax return. So in your case, whosoever has asked this question, please check if during up till 30th June 2024, that is from Jan to June 2024, if your income has exceeded 1 million. If yes, then of course you'll first have to register as a natural person and file any tax or any tax liability if you have for it. And if not, then you do not need to register. And for LLC, then definitely you need to register and file return accordingly. So I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, I think there's one more relevant question for offshore, which says that I think offshore companies are concerned about the registration because they don't have a trade license. They only have a certificate of incorporation. So how do you proceed with the registration? Saurabh, you would like to add some light on this?
Yes, yes. Like, so for offshore entities, we'll take the incorporation date because as you mentioned, we don't get licenses in offshore entities. So we'll take the incorporation date, and accordingly that the dates are specified, we'll do the registration, meeting the deadlines. And there is no option for offshore. As I mentioned, we'll select the legal person and other option to do the registration for offshore.
Thank you, Saurabh. Any other questions you would like to take? I think we can take one more. So there's an anonymous attendee who is asking that the company's register is engaged in trading of bathroom fittings, etc. I sell to MR, who installs it in the buildings and sells to the customer. Can my activity be considered as a distribution activity and be considered as a qualifying activity, assuming the trading is done from a designated zone? Now you do tick check the one condition, that is your trading is done from the designation zone. But one of the very important condition here is that the person who's buying from you should not be an ultimate end user. In this particular case, whether Imar, who is installing it in the building and selling it to its customers, can Imar be said to be an end user because it is selling the building or no? I think this would require some detailed evaluation. And you can write to us with overall facts and we can help you with this.
I think majority of the questions people do have is either with respect to the registration, or if I'm a qualifying free zone person or not, or if I'm doing any business would come under it. With respect to free zone, actually there we had our last session where we have exclusively answered all the questions that people had with respect to free zones. But still, if you have all these questions, all the people who have asked with for this free zone questions, we would love to answer all your questions and we'll drop an email for the details. It will be helpful if you can also drop us an email. We'll drop our email addresses on the chat box and you can answer. You can send your questions via it and we'll be happy to answer all the questions that you have. Do we take any other question or?
I can see there are two or three questions regarding manufacturing from anonymous attendees only. So regarding that, I just want to add that there are two types of qualifying activities. One is manufacturing, another is distribution of goods. So only distribution of goods needs to be done from designated free zone. And you can do manufacturing from any free zone. So manufacturing from any free zone will be a qualifying activity, but only distribution of goods is allowed from designated free zones. That's what I want to add here.
Okay, so I think we have answered majority of the questions that people have asked, and with respect to the other questions, we'd be happy to address all the questions you have. If Kushal, you can just address all the email addresses of us in the chat box and people can answer, ask their questions over there. Just to summarize today's session, we thought that instead of having, a regular session where we just give all the answers and just present the webinar, present our presentation and go in the flow, whatever the discussions or whatever specific topic we select, we thought we'll have just one-on-one conversation with the people and ask whatever questions they have in their mind, because still people have some basic understanding that needs to be clarified, and we thought it will be helpful if we have such kind of session. We'd be happy to have more such kind of sessions. If you like this session, it will help you as well. So that's a concern from our end. And also to elaborate, now the corporate tax has has come into picture. There is most, as explained earlier as well by Kinjal and me, that most of the dust is now quite clear. The only thing that you need to be mindful of is now you need to start preparing your books of accounts. You need to start maintaining proper books of accounts. If you are a free zone person, you need to start bifurcating the different streams of income that you are generating in your books of accounts very clearly to claim the benefit of a qualifying free zone person or to claim the benefit of 0% taxation. Apart from that, it is mandatory for everyone to register, whosoever the company is, as explained, and there are so many questions that were answered with respect to the registration. So be clear that everyone has to register. Apart from that, the other thing you have to be mindful of is that you need to get your books audited if you are a qualifying free zone person and if you want to avail the benefit of 0% taxation. If not, if you are a normal person, that is if you're a mainland entity, then if your revenue is exceeding 50 million, then you need to mandatorily get your books audited. So these are the basic criteria. Apart from that, of course, there are still many things we need to understand on a case basis. How long has your business been in existence? What are all the activities that you're conducting? For mainland entities, simple and clear. You have to pay the 9% tax irrespective of whatever business activities that you are earning. Of course, you get the benefit of 375,000 dirhams. But when it comes to a free zone entities, please identify what are the activities that you are undertaking. Once you identify those, get an advisory with respect to the activities you're conducting, whether they are a qualifying activities or not. And if it is, then you get the benefit of 0% taxation. Although if you get it avail, you need to still maintain the proper books of accounts, submit the proper returns and avail the benefit that you have. So that's all from our end. Kinjal, if you would want to highlight or add something from your end.
I think it was well summarized, Karishma. Just that it is very simple for mainland, but for free zones, the conditions are complex, and it is better that, we go step by step, assess, and then claim the 0% benefit.
Sure. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope the session was helpful and most of the questions were clear. Please ask your questions, whatever questions that you may have, and drop us and we'll be happy to answer those. Thank you so much, everyone.
For Nisar, who needs the recording of this session, you will receive an email. Everyone who is registered for the sessions would receive the email on your email IDs with the recording of the session. So, yeah.
I think there's just one poll question that we have. Was the information clear and understandable, and was the Q&A session helpful? So I hope it was